Greetings, sisters and brothers. Welcome to African History Club. This is episode number 56 today. I am your host, Milton Alimadi. I welcome sisters and brothers and comrades as usual. I thank all of you who continue to support this podcast. We are going into our second year now, I guess. Today, I want to go back to South Africa. I want to call this episode today The Ghost of Marikana. Many of you recall the Marikana Massacre of mine workers in South Africa in August 16, 2012. We're coming on the 10th anniversary shortly in August, but I didn't want to wait until then because one of the architects of that massacre, who is the current president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, is in a bit of some hot soup. So I wanted to tie that together, and that's why I wanted to call this The Ghost of Marikana. So before I get into the current hot soup that President Cyril Ramaphosa is wading deeply in, I want to recap Marikana. Marikana, as many of you recall, was when there was a wildcat walkout, a strike by mine workers in South Africa who were demanding better working conditions, better living conditions, and better wages. They were asking for a salary increase to $840 a month from $280 a month. These are people who can barely survive on their wages, people who live in what you could characterize as a shanty city near the mine with no effective sanitation, water, or electricity. Literally just across from the mine, which has all this energy, right across from the mine, where the senior officials live in a life of luxury. They were also protesting abominable work conditions in this platinum mine, where you have falling rocks, you have toxic fumes, you have toxic dust all over those workplaces where they were forced to work on a regular basis because they had no choice. Even the International Labor Organization condemned these working conditions, and even the Minister of Mines in South Africa condemned the working conditions. And what was also very appalling was the fact that the National Union of Mine Workers, NUM, was on the side of management because they were losing their authority. They had always been seen as not aggressive enough in representing the interest of the mine workers, and the membership had declined to 49% from 66%. So they had actually lost their right to organize in the mine. And at that time, a rival union was also emerging nationally in South Africa, the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union, AMCU. So it was under conditions that the massacre occurred. And at that time, of course, Cyril Ramaphosa was not yet president. He was busy making hundreds of millions of dollars as one of the leading the leading black elite that emerged in the post-apartheid era. And Steve Biko, the late Steve Biko, a hero of the anti-apartheid struggle, had warned about the emergence of people like Ramaphosa, but I'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to highlight the role that Ramaphosa played in that massacre. He was a member of the board of Longmen, which was the name of that mining company, Longmen Platinum. I want to read an email he shared with his fellow board members, essentially endorsing the massacre of the workers. Quote, "The terrible events that have unfolded cannot be described as a labor dispute. They are plainly dastardly criminal and must be characterized as such. There needs to be concomitant action to address the situation." And of course, that action was the massacre of the 34 workers. And in fact, prior to the 16th, at least 8 workers had already been killed by the South African police, as well as the security guards of the mining company. In fact, 2 of the mine workers were reportedly shot and killed by the union leadership when some of them were trying to march on the office of the union. The union that is supposedly was supposed to represent their interest. So 2 were reportedly killed by the union leaders, shot and killed. And of course, Ramaphosa is today not just a multimillionaire, but actually a billionaire. And not in South African rand, but in United States dollars. And he's the president of South Africa. But when he had emerged as president, some elements or some sections of society saw that as a huge relief coming after the notoriously corrupt Jacob Zuma, the previous president of South Africa. Of course, Zuma was notoriously reported to have taken bribes from many companies that sought to do business with the South African government while he was in power. And he had also reportedly embezzled millions of dollars in state funds to renovate a swimming pool in his private residence. And there's no indication that he even swims or knows how to swim. So people saw that as a huge relief. And of course, part of the reason why he was forced to resign was that his own colleagues in the ruling African National Congress saw that his presidency was no longer sustainable at some point. He was facing a barrage of endless media articles about the corruption allegations, and he was also facing serious campaign within parliament by Julius Malema's party, the Economic Freedom Fighters Party. The members of parliament belonging to his party would constantly stand up and interrupt him whenever he tried to address parliament. They would pursue him whenever he tried to conduct a press conference, and just made life a living hell for him. And I'll come back again to the role of the economic freedom fighters in helping to end the presidency of Jacob Zuma. So yes, after Zuma, pretty much anyone was seen as a possible improvement. But I myself never harbored any of that notion. I felt that a person who is a former union leader, who was Cyril Ramaphosa, a leading activist on the streets during the era fighting against the apartheid regime, and is now in recent years totally focused on just accumulating private wealth to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, and now apparently more than $1 billion. I harbored no such notion that he would be an improvement at all over Jacob Zuma. Perhaps He would not be as colorful as Zuma. Perhaps he would never be forced to go on trial for forcing himself on a young lady. And many of you may remember that incident when Zuma literally forced himself and had sex with the daughter of a friend. This is supposedly a daughter of a friend. And he forced himself on her and had unprotected sex. And then later on said, when was asked about the issue of HIV/AIDS, he said after he had sex with her, he did take some precaution. And that precaution was taking a shower. It was just unbelievable. Many of you who may have forgotten or was not familiar with that incident, you can obviously research and look it up. So Zuma had been a serious disappointment. Obviously, we're looking at South Africa, the land of Winnie Mandela, Nelson Mandela, Steve Biko, Robert Sobukwe, and all those other leading liberation fighters, Albert Lutuli, Joe Slovo, Ruth First, and all those who gave their lives for the struggle. So then you have a Zuma as president of South Africa. And now we have a Cyril Ramaphosa focused on accumulating wealth, while the status quo remains pretty much intact in South Africa. The apartheid regime has merely changed face, as Steve Biko warned. And I wanted to see if I can find his precise quote. This is an interview that Biko gave before he was murdered in 1977. Okay, here it is. Any form of political freedom that does not touch on the distribution of wealth will be meaningless. And he's talking about the post-apartheid era in South Africa. If we have a mere change of face of those in governing positions, Black people will continue to be poor, and you get a few blacks filtering through into the so-called bourgeoisie, and our society will be run almost as if of yesterday. So Steve Biko warned about this, and this is precisely what we have in South Africa. We have the formal apartheid, legal apartheid is over, but essentially we have apartheid light. We have apartheid in blackface is what we have in South Africa today. Sad to put it that way, but there's no other way. There's no denying it. We don't see the signs, blacks, whites only, and blacks here, so-called coloreds here. We don't see those signs anymore. But those were the symbols. But the fundamental structures remain the same. And that's what Biko warned about. And then Walter Rodney also, speaking to a broader audience in a lecture in 1979, said something which is remarkably similar. He's speaking on a broader scale, and this is what Walter Rodney said. He said, the petite bourgeoisie as a class is unable constitutionally to lead any third world country anywhere except to destruction. And he was specifically referring to Africa and the Caribbean. And he gave a very interesting analysis. And I've mentioned this particular lecture before in another podcast, previous podcast. And the title of that lecture is Crisis in the Periphery, Africa and the Caribbean. And I strongly recommend that. It's maybe about an hour or just over an hour. It's a very compelling lecture. And in terms of the one by Steve Biko, you can simply put on YouTube a Steve Biko interview. And that one is short. I think it's about 28 minutes or so. So now let's look at the current crisis, the hot soup that President Ramaphosa finds himself in, and which, would not be shocking if it undermines his presidency, makes it very difficult for him to govern, and eventually if it could drive him out of office, which would be deservedly so. And I think this is probably just the tip of the iceberg. So this news broke about a week ago that there had been a burglary on the farm, a game reserve farm belonging to President Cyril Ramaphosa. And when did it happen? Over 2 years ago, February 2020. Yet it's just breaking now. And what was stolen at this farm? $4 million in US currency, in cash. And where was this money on the farm? It was stitched on the body of some of the sofas in his home, this farm home that is owned by President Ramaphosa. Now, it's only revealed now. And why is this? Because a former head of intelligence services in South Africa, for whatever reason, filed a police complaint with all the facts and evidence about a week ago. And Cyril Ramaphosa did not deny this burglary and is now saying he cannot speak further on it or provide a lot of information because it's under investigation. An investigation that never would have occurred had this former intelligence chief not filed a complaint about a week ago. So obviously the question is, why is he filing it now? There's speculation that he may be working with people belonging in the opposition parties that want to bring down Ramaphosa, or even his own rivals within the ruling African National Congress. Be that as it may, that is of secondary concern. Of primary concern are many questions. Number one, who keeps $4 million in cash in his home? Number two, who stitches this money in the body of a sofa? Obviously, it's almost like something you can't even script from Hollywood. We're talking high-scale banditry or mafia right here. And then number three, why did President Ramaphosa never report this burglary? Just think about it. $4 million stolen. He finds out about it and he never reports it. Obviously, other people found out about it. The intelligence chief knew about it, but he could not have been the only person who knew about it. And now there are reports that Ramaphosa himself was involved in searching down these individuals who robbed. And I think it was not difficult because their video cameras protecting the premises captured the burglars. And you could clearly see them. And in fact, Julius Malema's Economic Freedom Fighters Party has played some of this video at a press conference, which also indicates that, obviously, people in the know are also working with at least one of these opposition parties, which is Julius Malema's EFF party. So it was known, and reportedly, these burglars had been tipped by a domestic worker, and presumably either she or he expected to get their cut from the proceeds of this burglary. And reportedly, at least in some of the South African reports, was that the individuals, either the individual that involved in the burglary or the domestic worker, or perhaps all of them, were also tortured to reveal the extent of the information that could be extracted from them, and that this was also reportedly done either with the knowledge or orders of Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa. And then reportedly, subsequently, they were all bribed. They were all paid off to remain silent about this burglary that they were involved in, with the $4 million. And presumably, this was of interest, and this was the ultimate goal that Ramaphosa wanted. And obviously, it appears to be the case, since he never reported the burglary up to date. And of course, we can speculate that it's possible many other people had to be bribed to suppress this burglary of $4 million, which of course raises the question about the nature of the South African state. You would have had to have bribed the people in the security forces or the police force who were involved in apprehending these individuals, in torturing these individuals, and also keeping quiet about their role in the suppression of this major burglary. And of course, they would have had to been offered incentives for them to have gone along and maintain their silence. So imagine this thing we're seeing right now is just the tip of the iceberg. It's not possible to suppress such a major incident without the active involvement of many apparatus of the government in the highest levels. So imagine more will be revealed in the coming days, in the coming weeks. Now, here's the most preposterous aspect so far that I've heard. While Ramaphosa himself has not been that forthcoming, one of his spokespersons claimed that the money were proceeds from the sale of some of these exotic game belonging to President Ramaphosa. So here's the deal. If this was legitimate proceeds from legitimate sale, why would it be stitched in a sofa? If it was legitimate proceed from legitimate sale, did President Ramaphosa declare this income, this revenue, and pay taxes on this revenue? And in any case, when he became president, there was concern about his business empire and his $1 billion, and he had supposedly put all his business in a blind trust. Well, this sales that generated $4 million did not seem to be a very blind trust. And he seemed to be very actively involved in it and in suppressing the information from coming out. So that is where we stand today with this crisis of the $4 million in sofa, in a farm belonging to President Cyril Ramaphosa. So while it may sound like something out of a Hollywood screenplay, I think it raises many, many questions about the nature of the state in post-apartheid South Africa. It takes us back to the concerns that forward-looking visionaries like Steve Biko, the concerns they expressed and the fears they had about what kind of society would emerge in post-apartheid South Africa. And of course, in the case of Biko, he said that if we did not address the issues such as income redistribution, who owns the mines and other national resources in South Africa, and as he put it, the society would be run as if it was the society of yesterday. And it seems that's what we still have in a post-apartheid South Africa. And obviously, this was also a concern expressed by people like the late Robert Sobukwe. And I'm happy to say I did a recent podcast focusing on Sobukwe, who did not get enough credit for his role in fighting the apartheid system. He was, of course, the one who was responsible for organizing the protest, the anti-pass book carrying protest that ultimately led to the Sharpeville massacre and his banishment and his arrest and his slow motion killing in incarceration, released under house arrest, but eventually a shell of himself, and ultimately he died as well. So what is the final thoughts on this incident? The final thought is that even though it's a very flawed democracy, the institutions in South Africa still function compared to many African countries. And this story is now emerging because they have a vigorous media in South Africa, which is able to report this and put sufficient pressure on the South African president. And it was because of pressure from media, which of course mobilized public opinion against him, that ultimately led to the downfall of Jacob Zuma. And I say that to suggest that we could have a similar effect when it comes to Cyril Ramaphosa. And beyond that, so there's some of the institutions that still sustain and protect the state in South Africa. So when you compare it to many other African countries, South Africa, of course, has many, many avenues ahead. But when you look at has the post-apartheid state addressed the issues that led to the struggle for liberation in South Africa, then the answer is a resounding no. And that struggle obviously continues. And then I'm reminded of what Walter Rodney also said in that same lecture that I recommend, that ultimately in Africa and in the Caribbean, the struggle must be led by political parties that represent the interests of the workers, whether they're urban workers, whether you include students in this, whether you include the rural peasant farmers. In other words, when he had a very broad definition of workers, the people who generate income for the country, as opposed to the elite, the ruling elite, who control government, and therefore they decide on how to allocate surplus in these countries. So unless and until we have parties like that that represent their interests and also led by these workers, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a serious challenge. So I would like to end on that note, this particular episode 56. I also want to give you an update, a quick update. We now have 12 students, or participants rather. I want to say participants because everybody is going to be contributing. It's going to be more like a conversational series of classes for my African history classes that will begin at 12 noon on June the 18th, 2022. Every Saturday, beginning at 12 noon until 1:30. We'll go longer if need be for 10 consecutive weekends. One weekend, I think we'll take a break, but a total of 10 lectures, the last one being August 27. The syllabus is now ready. If anybody is still interested in considering it, let me know, and I will send you a copy of the syllabus. And I've already sent the first assignment out to the 12 participants as well. And I'll be happy to send it to you if you're interested in signing up for this 10 lecture series. And you can contact me via mallimadi@gmail.com. That's MALLIMADI, mallimadi@gmail.com. And I'll send you a copy of the syllabus if you also wanted to consider joining us beginning next Saturday, June the 18th. So thank you for your support as always. Stay strong, stay Pan-African, and see you again soon. Bye-bye.